Good evening, and thank you for all coming out tonight. So you got a little bit of a preview on the text message, although that probably didn't tell you a whole lot about what I was thinking for tonight. And this is something that I've been pondering over a bit recently, and as I put together this evening's topic, or whatever you want to call it, presentation, I was once again lit a passion inside of me, and I'm hoping that tonight you can catch a little bit of that, catch the thrust and catch the plea, not of Drew, but of our Heavenly Father and what His goal is. And as I was putting this together, too, I was thinking back of Zach's sermon, was that 2 weeks ago? When we have the why of church, and that leads us to the what. And why we have church leads us to the what, which is the mission of the church. And the mission of the church is to make disciples of all nations, which you're going to hear a lot of that tonight. So hopefully that inspires you. Learn, pray, and join. We can't pray if we don't know. So part of this is going to be a informational session, all right? You have to know so you can know how to pray, all right? So there's going to be a bunch of numbers thrown at you tonight, and I'm not going to have a pop quiz, but just to understand what the world looks like in terms of missions, what the odds are for us as we tackle this, and also pray, and I'll explain more about that, what to pray, how to pray, etc. But it's one of the things we can do. But also, if we just stop there, I think we're missing something. So we actually want to join in this as a global church to further the kingdom. A global summary. Does anyone know the total global population as it stands currently? Anybody know? What's that? Yes, there is children's class. You know what? The last time there were children's classes and I was up front, I did the exact same thing. I get all ready to go. There is children's classes tonight. Ages 2 through 8. Ages 2 through 8, you guys can head on downstairs. Sorry. Mom offered to get that together for me, and I said yes, and then I completely forgot about it. Global population, 8 billion, I heard. Yes, the number I found, 8,236,000, but obviously that number is changing as we speak. Now, the term unreached people group, you're going to hear a lot of, and I'll explain a little bit of what that is, but the total amount of people on this world that are termed unreached, or these numbers and the definitions come from the Joshua Project, and so they would say that the unreached people group have very few evangelicals. I think less than 2% is their definition, and also very few that would even identify as Christians, and therefore very little history, very little current work is being done in these people, and that is 3.4 billion people. 43% of our world, as it stands right now, would be termed unreached. Now, if we can break that down even a little bit further, there's a term called frontier people groups, all right? And this is 2 billion. So a quarter of the people are considered frontier. So this is a term in the unreached group where the Joshua Project would state that there's less than 1% that would identify as Christians. Less than 1%. And there's more people in the frontier people groups, that 2 billion people, than the combined population of North, Central, and South America, Western Europe, North Africa, Middle East, Australia, and Oceania combined. More people in the frontier, which is like less than 1%. 1 person out of 1,000 who would identify as a Christian. Minimally reached, Joshua Project states about 3.1 of our world would classify as that. Very few evangelicals, but there would be a fair amount who would identify as being Christian. Going on, the next category is superficially reached, about almost 7% of our world. So a few more evangelicals, many more who would identify, but also a lack there of their commitment to the Christian faith. Partially reached, We have just shy of 2 billion people, and it would classify this as a modest presence. I don't have all the percentages of what they break that down as, and then the significantly reached, you can see there about 23%, where evangelicals as a whole would have a very significant presence. Now, it's easy just to hear those numbers, and they roll off my tongue, and they go through us, and it's hard to really grasp. But if we could take the entire world, right, and simplify it down to 10 people, can we do that tonight? Imagine 10 people. I thought about getting 10 people up here. Maybe I should have, but just 10 people. One of those 10 people would be a Jesus follower, a Christian. 1 out of 10. The next 2, or 20%, would say that they know who Jesus is, but they're not identifying with him, they're not following him, they're not being obedient to what he is, or their obedience maybe is doubtful or questionable. But moving on, about 40% would have some access to the gospel, but yet have not made a commitment. But the last 3 people, 30%, have no access to the gospel, never heard the term Jesus, don't know what he is, who it even is. 30% of our world would fall into that category. So that's kind of the state of Christianity as it stands in the world. And to make it very, very simple. Now, where are these people located? There's a term, the 1040 window, that we talk about quite a bit, and that is here from northern Africa over here to the southeast. So the green dots would represent what they would call the reached people groups, whether it be the partially or the minimally reached or the significantly reached. Those are the green numbers. The red dots are actually little dots. I know you can't see them. But the red dots are actually those they would call unreached. And you can see where those people are mainly popular. That's why they call it the 1040 window. From the longitudinal lines, they fall in that section of the world. Now there's another map I want to look at from Voice of the Martyrs. And the darker countries are what they would call restricted countries. Voice of the Martyrs would classify those countries as government-sanctioned circumstances that lead to Christians being harassed, imprisoned, killed, or deprived of possessions or liberties. So the restricted nations is at a government level. All right, the government is out to get you, therefore most everyone else is. The hostile nations, the governments would at least have a statement of freedom of religion per se, but a lot of the harassment comes from a local level, whether it be community members, your neighbors, your friends, your family, if they're not following Jesus Christ as well. So when you compare this map here and this map, you can quickly see why these two maps, or how they're related, and why that would be significant. But later on, we're going to look mainly in this area, but we'll get there a little bit later. A lot of people right in there. If you want to turn this into a Greek lesson, Pante ta ethni, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but is a term, I think it's used 9 times in the New Testament. We're going to look at 3 times here tonight. Jesus used it in Matthew 24:14, where he says, "In this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations." That's that great term, all nations. "And then shall the end come." The next one, very popular from the Great Commission, as it's called, in Matthew 28, where Jesus says, "Go ye therefore and teach," whom? All nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. And a vision of the future from Revelation 7. "And after this, I, John, beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations, or ethne, or people groups, and kindreds, and people, and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb." John got a glimpse into the heavenly throne room where all nations, all people groups. And to us tonight, it seems like just a percentage or a number. But all nations can sit. And so I'm going to bring this a little bit closer home tonight, and I'm going to look at 5 specific countries. And after that, we're then going to pray for those 5 specific countries as a group. So the first one I'll look at is India. India was one of those that has a high influence of unreached people groups. It is a restricted country, so there is a certain amount of freedom that can be happening, but yet at a general level it is very restricted. Population 1.4 billion, so that's about an eighth of the world's population lives in India. Now, out of the 31 largest FPG, frontier people group, so the Joshua Project has a list of 31 of the largest people groups, over 100,000 of the frontier people groups. 16 of them are in India. And there's 2,135 unreached people groups in India. That's 90% of the population of India is classified as unreached. 90%. And India would be classified, or is predominantly Hindu, about 75%. Pakistan, I grade the map out a little bit so you can see my words over top of it, but we have India here, and then Pakistan to its northwest a little bit. Now, Pakistan would be considered a hostile country, and again, that's at the government level, so very much anti-Christian. About 241 million people, and there's 828 unreached people groups in Pakistan, and out of those 828, 805 of them are considered frontier people groups. So 99.2% of the entire Pakistan country is classified as unreached. 99%. And some of the largest frontier people groups would be in Pakistan, 4 of them to be precise. And they would be predominantly Sunni Muslim. 96% of the country would classify as that. The next one is Bangladesh, and as I mentioned before, this area is very popular. So we talk about India, talk about Pakistan right here, and now we're in Bangladesh. Bangladesh would be a hostile country, have a population of 173 some million people, and the largest frontier people group of the world reside in Bangladesh, 134 million people. The largest frontier people group, completely unreached, virtually no access, 134,000 people. There's 289 unreached people groups in the country, which makes up almost 93% of the country as unreached, and they would also be predominantly Hindu. China, to the north of these countries that we've been discussing, is a hostile country with a population of 1.4 billion. The country has 272 frontier people groups, has a total of 441 unreached people groups, and just shy of 81% of the country would be considered unreached. And again, it's just numbers on a screen after a while, isn't it? It's just hard to really comprehend. China, a lot of the country would identify as non-religious, and that's a lot of the reason because of the Chinese government and their strong stance. And so there is church allowed. We have to be a lot of registered churches. And so a lot of the country, as you can see, there's just simply, well, we're just non-religious. It's just a general term, but there is the Catholic Church is in China, but it is very much regulated by the government. And finally, Afghanistan. So this here is India, by the way, and this is Pakistan, and now this is Afghanistan. So, like I said, we're staying right there in that group with a lot of people and unreached people groups. A very hostile country to the Christian religion, a population of 173 million people, and of the 70 people groups that are in Afghanistan, 60 would be considered frontier people groups. So just 2 out of all the people groups in Afghanistan, only 2 would be considered partially reached. The rest are all unreached people groups, 97.1%. And Afghanistan would be predominantly Muslim. So those are the 5 countries: India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, China, and Afghanistan. And we'll pray for those here shortly. And I don't know what I can do as a presenter per se to make the numbers relevant to our day-to-day life. I'm not sure there's anything I can do. And I think that as I was putting this together, it did help as you read and you research and you see these numbers, and it does something to you. It really does. And it feels almost like we're just tied. Seems like the devil's winning. And we are just, stuck here in Lebanon, Lancaster County. And it's just hard to wrap our minds around the vast number of people who have no access to the Bible that we have easy access to, and have no recollection, no idea, of what Jesus is, what Christianity is, and yet something that we relate with, we deal with, we understand, we're being taught. So how do we pray? And this is the first thing, and this is something that I want to work into my prayer life more specifically, is unreached people groups and such like. But it's hard to just look at the numbers and just pray for the numbers, per se. And so I want to give us some ideas of how to pray. One starts here at home. Pray for a church here. Pray for Myerstown. Pray for the Anabaptist church here, that the church at large, whether it just be Anabaptist church or just churches across the world, the people among them that are Christians would be empowered to go and to send missionaries to those unreached people groups. And then pray for God's moving. We can't do this on our own. We're not asked to do this on our own. But pray that God's Spirit would move, would go in front of the missionaries that are there, that would bring conviction of sin, that they would see their need, these people. And then, as a result, pray that the movements would happen. Pray that people would be drawn to Christ, that churches would be planted. This is all taken from Joshua Project. And then pray that as people respond to the gospel, that they can then be properly discipled. And that's a big need, too. There's places where there's fledgling churches, and yet there's no one there to disciple them, to train them. There's no leaders. So pray that God would draw leaders. And finally, one more for us here at home. Luke 10:2. Jesus says, "Therefore said he unto them, his disciples, the harvest truly is great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore, the Lord of the harvest, that he would send forth laborers into his harvest." Pray that God would send laborers from among us, from among Myerstown, from among your friends, that God would lead them to the unreached people groups. So we learned about unreached people groups, frontier people groups, terms that were new, or some of them were new to me, and the great vast numbers, how to pray. And now I want to talk about how to join in this. I think, first of all, it goes back to learning. There is a host of resources, and I thought about trying to print papers out from Joshua Project and put them back there, and I didn't know what to even print. There's just so much available. So check out the Joshua Project. They have the people groups of the world broken down specifically. And you can look at all the different people groups, and so check them out. Voice of the Martyrs, a fantastic resource specifically on restricted and hostile nations. They have a free magazine you can subscribe to. It gets sent to my house, I don't know how often. Just stories of what Christians, our brothers and sisters, are actually facing that don't live where we do. And then Operation World is this big book. So this would break down different countries. It tells you the different statistics, population, religion, and then also specific prayer requests for each nation. So if your house does not have one of them, pick them up. It's a fantastic resource as well. And again, pray. Find an unreached people group or a frontier people group. Again, Joshua Project has them all listed. Pray for them as a family. Get your children involved. Or even as individuals, put them on your prayer list and pray. It's one of the first things we can do. Obviously, support through prayer, support through financial support as well. There's various missions that are reaching out. A little closer home would be Riley and Katharina. They are planning to reach a minority people group in Southeast Asia called the Isala. I don't know if I'm saying that right, people group. And they are leaving, when are they leaving? End of November. So there would be a way where you could financially support someone or a team that's going to an unreached people group and working on getting a Bible into their language. And finally, go would be the biggest way to join the movement of unreached people groups. So my plan tonight, like I said, is to break into groups, co-ed here just in the auditorium, and pray for those nations. Let's spend some time praying for these countries specifically.